Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and this morning I'm looking at an excellent book which has come to us from Oxford University Press. It's part of a series of books which are going to be published. This one is called International Crimes, Law and Practice, and it's volume 1 on genocide. It's been written by Professor Guénael Mettraux. More about the professor in a few minutes. Elizabeth was the lead writer, and we discussed the book in some detail because it's an important work. I've got it over here to show you. Let's put it up there. It's quite a heavy book. We'll have a look at the book in a minute. The title of the book for our book review we've given is Fascinating and Insightful Scholarship on the Crime of Crimes, a new legal text on genocide from Oxford University Press, and that's what you're getting here. Now let's just have a quick look at the book itself. It's a sort of hardback, heavy hardback. There we go. There's the front, you can see there. There's the spine. There's nothing on the back, but as I say, it's a heavy book, very much the house style of Oxford University Press. And if we go to the back, it's under 500 pages long. There's a substantial index, which you can probably see. It's similar to the way that they produce their indexes, but the typeface is quite small, but it's also emboldened. So things do stand out quite nicely. And in fact, it does have a comment there about the index. It says, for the benefit of digital users, index terms that span 2 pages may on occasion appear on any one of the pages. And it also includes discussions of cases and other substantive content. So it's a slightly different index from what one might be interested in seeing. Now, the bibliography is also different because it's an A to Z bibliography, which again I found quite interesting, and of course there's a great deal in it, bearing in mind the huge books and monographs, and runs all the way through. But you will find the very substantial amount of detail to be expected, obviously, in that section. And there, of course, are, as you can see, lots and lots of footnotes all the way through. And the book, of course, does have paragraph numbering, which you can see indented there, and you can see again a lot of footnoting. There is a lot actually in this particular one, but there again, it's a very serious issue. There's the front page. Then there's a detail about the OUP, and then there is a dedication. I'm not going to read it out, you can read it there. We only publish books that we think are important and relevant for practitioners and academics, and we don't see any point in actually publishing or reviewing books which we don't like, because there's no point. It's a waste of time. People put a lot of effort into these books, so I don't really feel it's appropriate to criticise. There's a very useful foreword which is worth reading from William A. Shabas, and it's looking at the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and he talks at some length about it. You can see obviously all the usual references are going to be there, if I can call it that, because there's been a lot of case law over the years, and they're all very well known, of course. The preface itself is also worth reading, again relatively short, and then after that you've got the contents section there, and then after that you go into cases and what is called documents. Quite useful to see the way it's actually structured. It's slightly different because it's an international book. Then you've got some jurisprudence dealing specifically with Second World War case law, cases, tables of cases and documents continuing there. Obviously a lot of names will be mentioned, and countries, specific countries where atrocities have taken place. Again, at the end of that you then get to the book itself. Chapter 1, Towards a Universal Law of International Crimes, General Introduction. Long overdue, of course, but something that will come about eventually. There's the footnoting you can see at the bottom. You can see the basic motivation of the book. It's a first-class book, and I do hope, certainly long after my time doing these book reviews, that we will move towards an era where we do actually have a unified code. That obviously is the long-term aim, but in the meantime this book is filling an important gap because at the moment a lot of countries have their own basic agendas as to what they want to do. So what do we say about the book? Well, once again, OUP have published an important new legal text that promises to become the definitive work in its subject area. In this case, it's international crimes. As I say, the beginning of it is Genocide, Volume 1. The author is a professor and a doctor, Guénael Mettraux, and I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Obviously, I apologise in advance if I got the pronunciation wrong. But the good professor points out that there are 4 of these identifiable crimes in terms of international crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and aggression. They're all related, but each different from the other in several respects. And so in this first volume of what is going to be a multi-volume work, the focus is on genocide, and it is this volume which is the subject of our review today. The author's stated aim is to provide an overlap and an overview, if you like, of the law and practice pertaining to international crimes to help practitioners and scholars navigate the complex and sometimes turbulent waters of international law. It's a difficult, delicate area. We don't have our own jurisdictions, but international law is always in a very separate category. The book's first 2 chapters reveal the history, specifically the evolution of the concept of international crimes, with the focus in the second chapter centering on genocide, which lamentably, as a relatively recent phenomenon, emerges as a minutely detailed, complex and multifaceted subject. Historically, of course, it's gone on down the decades and down the centuries, but we are now looking at the subject actually for the first time, I suggest, in a really responsible way. And that's really why this book is, I think, so valuable. It's a challenging exercise, of course, to list just a few examples of the topics covered. Nonetheless, it's well worth mentioning that the book covers such issues as duties to prevent and punish genocide, punishable acts, and the challenge of establishing genocidal intent, which can always be extremely controversial and debatable, mainly by the people who've carried it out, I would hasten to add. Noted, of course, as the crime of crimes, genocide, like all crimes, lends itself to analysis in terms of mens rea and actus reus, the latter involving conspiracy to commit genocide, including incitement, complicity and much more. Further discussion covers aspects such as genocidal crime and lists the following: planning, ordering, committing and aiding and abetting genocide. And the book is obviously very heavily research based, as indicated by the impressive 36-page bibliography at the back. It's a gift for any researcher, in our view, seeking further information on what is a very vexed topic. Such research, of course, will inevitably offer up new and often disconcerting insights and opinions on genocide. One in particular is a comment on the Nuremberg Tribunal, which, in the words of the author, quote, failed to recognise the specific criminal character of the final solution, describing it, in effect, as just one aspect of Germany's aggressive wars rather than a specifically criminal enterprise of mass killing. I think that's a very valid point. We're talking now of almost 80 years since the beginning of World War II. So you can see again that this subject will be visited again and again because of the precedent was established with Nuremberg itself. He goes on to say the tribunal misunderstood the true nature of these crimes and distorted their historical significance. There is plenty of excellent footnoted material cited here in the book, in this volume 1, as well as throughout most of the book, which substantiates this point and any number of other conclusive statements. So I do feel that that's of value for a jurisprudent, because you are actually looking at the justification and the substantiation of any points made. And it's interesting to note in the preface that the author was influenced and inspired in large part by Judge David A. Hunt, a judge at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Mettraux was thus introduced to a new fascinating legal culture, which in timely fashion is further introduced to readers of this book. And again, as I say, we unfortunately have had so many instances of genocide. It would be hoped eventually that we will not have this sort of thing in the future, but the fact is it is there, and we therefore need to have a proper international code of law which everybody who's rational in any event will follow. There will be regimes that are way outside this, and we all know who they are. I'm not going to mention them here. Let me conclude by saying that this volume offers a final word on terrorism which, although brief, is pertinent if controversial in the light of contemporary problems and concerns. That's another thing. It's not going to go away, and we've got to face it, but we've got to come up to the plate and make sure that we have a proper code which is enforceable. So the book itself, I think, is rightly described as scholarly, analytical, thorough, and certainly a readable volume. It's recently published title from OUP, and it should certainly attract, I think, a broad-based international readership, particularly amongst international lawyers. Now, the publication date of the hardback first volume is cited as at the 13th of July 2019. Let's just have another look at the book. Make sure I don't drop things all over the place. There we go. There's the front. There's the spine. Nothing on the back. We just open it in the middle. I'm coming to... this is Chapter 10, Imposing Measures Intended to Prevent Births Within the Group. That's, again, detailed information. You see there's a lot of footnoting there. Sometimes it is a little overdone, but in fact what you've got here is a lot of detail concerning specific trials, just in that particular example. We're looking generally at, again, you can see the structure here in Chapter 10. We're looking very much at punishable acts, and we're looking at, as I say, this is the issue of mens rea and actus reus. So there is a very strong common law trend throughout, and if we just go back to, again, you can see here, that's a very long extract there. But the detail, which is actually right at the back, contained in both the index itself and the actual bibliography, shows you how much effort has been put into this by the author. Anyway, I'd like to thank Professor Mettraux and everybody at OUP for this book. I think it's an important commentary on where we are at the moment with this most serious of international crimes. The book is well worth reading, and I'm sure in due course this will become a very, very important research staple for everyone. So thank you. Bye-bye.